And welcome in. Pressbox and PressBoxOnline.com are happy to present this Zoom video with our special guest tonight, Executive Director of Sports for Maryland, Terry Hasseltine. I'm with Gary Stein. I'm Stan, the fan of Pressbox. And Terry, we welcome you in. How are you doing?
I'm outstanding. Stan, life is treating myself and my family, well during this unique and challenging time in our state, in our country, and all globally. So we're doing pretty good.
All right. Well, we got a lot to dig in on talking about sports in the state of Maryland. Before we get into what the pandemic has done, when I look you up online, I Google Terry Hasseltine, I see, and I know you've told me this, and you say it a lot to people, that not only are you the executive director of sports for the state of Maryland, you are also vice president of the Stadium Authority. Tell us a little bit about what that responsibility is, what it does for you in your position.
Okay, so my role with being the vice president of the Maryland Stadium Authority and overseeing marketing and communications is to ensure there's continuity in how materials come and go out of the agency. Rachelina Bonacci, who is our PIO, is really the information center hub. But for us, it's about creating continuity. It's about the Maryland sports, which is my primary role. Having connectivity with the clubs, the stadia, and the expertise that comes with being a part of a world-class team in the Maryland Stadium Authority, but also being, like I said, connected to the Orioles and the Ravens on a regular basis. The 85-acre complex of Camden Yards is a usable space for festivals and events and the like. So it keeps us engaged on the event side of things and large-scale events, and that interconnectivity allows us to be the principal behind things like World Cup bids, behind the Maryland Cycling Classic, create engaging initiatives because you have the expertise there, you have the knowledge base. So it creates an opportunity and a platform for us to really create a very robust sport tourism industry in the state of Maryland. So you have the Stadium Authority, Maryland Sports, and then the Sport and Entertainment Corporation of Maryland, which is our nonprofit arm, which I'm also the president of that.
All right. Well, we've got a lot to dig in. I thank you for explaining that to me. Terry, this pandemic that hit in through February and really hit and closed everything down in mid-March, it's had to cost the state an enormous amount of money. Just give us a picture of one area, the youth amateur sports terrain. What is that loss going to look like to the state of Maryland in calendar 2020?
Well, the pandemic hit right as we were about to roll into our high tournament season. High tournament season in the state of Maryland is basically April through July, and then it starts to wane towards the end of the summer as we get ready for school. And then 3-day weekends are, big impacts. We lost somewhere in the ballpark about 140 youth and amateur sporting events during this period of time. Those events would have generated up over $85 million in direct spending on Maryland's economy. That's a ton of people not coming to the state. That's a ton of people not eating in our restaurants and staying in our hotels, and also getting out to see the attractions and amenities that makes Maryland so great. So it's a huge loss.
And just one more thing before Gary asks you a couple of questions. That doesn't include, had you had a friendly match during the summer at Ravens Stadium or M&T Stadium, or maybe another concert, maybe if not even the size of Billy Joel, but a big concert. So
it's 100% youth. It's 100% kids playing games on fields, on courts, on various platforms and gymnasiums and the like across the entire state of Maryland. We lost Memorial Day weekend, which is usually our largest youth tournament weekend. The number of lacrosse tournaments across the state on that weekend alone. Look back to 2014, 11, and 10 when we had both the NCAA men's and women's lacrosse championships, and we also had the women's national tournament, plus elites, Columbus Day, invitational, and there was a plethora of other events that went on. That weekend alone was $100 million in direct spending on Maryland's economy. Just that one weekend. So just imagine, we lost Labor Day, but we had NCAA women's scheduled to be here, but you add that into the equation. So right now we're projecting through our office that it is about $85 million in direct spending lost to Maryland during this 12-week period of time.
Terry, I'm looking at the computer here at the governor's press conference today. It's a big day, actually, in Maryland, because he announced stage 2 reopenings. Now indoor dining will be available for Maryland residents, outdoor amusements as well. So I wonder, how does that pronouncement affect you and these youth tournaments? And a follow-up, is there any chance that anything in July or August that was pre-booked can still happen in the state?
Well, the one thing that was not included in the press conference today, and I honestly don't know the rationale, but there was a Maryland Department of Health order that coincides there too, that does allow youth and amateur sports to start getting back to some level of normal capacity. It went back to the previous executive order where we allowed youth and amateur sports to start getting for training and conditioning. The order that's out there, and it is in the process of being posted as we speak, allows a lot more latitude for these youth and amateur organizations to start getting back to what makes their business tick. Not only did we lose that kind of money when it comes to the just direct spending on Maryland's economy, the number of small businesses that own these events or the venues that they play in are small business. They were impacted. They were taking out the PPP loans and the small business EIDL loans and getting some state support just to keep their doors open. And we're very fortunate right now that today's announcement, may not have been stated within the press conference itself, but the documents that do support it are there now, so our businesses can start getting back to a level of normalcy. Now, do I think they'll get back to 100% capacity? No, because there's going to be a lot of restrictions. But the fact that they can get back to some level and help our economy, and also get our kids active during the summer months, which is usually the time in which these things are very robust, it's a positive move in the right direction, but still a long way to go.
Terry, quick question. Different states opened or reopened at different times. Many of the southern states kind of got a jump on the states in the mid-Atlantic and the north. Is there a danger of some of those states, maybe a North Carolina or a South Carolina, because they got a jump on a state like Maryland, taking an event? Are you concerned about that at all?
Well, a lot of people don't realize that the youth and amateur sports market is extremely competitive. 15 years ago, there was a handful of cities out there vying for this marketplace. Now there's over 650 destinations across the United States. This is a $19.8 billion industry in the United States, bigger than the NFL, bigger than Major League Baseball, bigger than NHL, bigger than the NBA. $19.8 billion industry annually here in the United States alone. So when you take that, microcosm of what's going on, people had to make shifts and adjustment into their schedule. Right. And they were trying to figure out where they could get back, because you got to remember, a lot of these people are business people as well. So they're just trying to figure out where can they do business at a time when they're not allowed to do business somewhere else. So were there some shifts? Yes. However, do I think it's long-term shift? I hope not. But our team at Maryland Sports, along with our Team Maryland partners across the state, are working our tail off to ensure that those relationships stay, solid, so that when we are at our full capacity again, people know that Maryland's arms are open and we're ready to receive them back in. I get why they might have had to move, and hopefully it's a temporary move. And our job is to make sure that it is temporary and they get back here and put their anchor back on the soil of Maryland.
Terry, fortunately for you, this pandemic, while as devastating as it has been economically, it's not really impacting the 2026 World Cup in any direct way yet. But we alluded to it earlier. You probably would have had a friendly this summer, next summer. Has anything at all changed in your preparation? And again, we want to make it clear, it's a 3-country hosting event in 2026. It's Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Has this impacted your preparations for getting Maryland in as good a position as possible?
Well, it has to some degree. We were supposed to have a huge conference right as the pandemic hit, where all the cities vying for the opportunity were supposed to come together and talk about the next steps. Well, obviously that got postponed, and now it's kind of a little bit of a behind-the-scenes arm race about how can you tout your destination, how can you make yourself relevant, and then at the same time you're dealing with a pandemic that is really dominating the news cycle, and then you're dealing with the current status of Black Lives Matter and the protests and the things that are going on culturally right now in our in our country, and trying to find the right time to penetrate, the support and going out and getting those opportunities, presence. It's been a unique battle that way. But the nice part is it gave us a little bit more time to flesh out our website that we're going public with on Monday of next week. It allowed us to get some more support locally from people of significance who are endorsing our effort and coming out and saying that Baltimore is the right place for this event, saying that M&T Bank Stadium is obviously a world-class venue and a world-class destination. So those type of things are starting to swell. So when we do finally get a chance to launch it, we're going to be a step ahead because we've had a chance to really refine a few things here and there. Now the summer is going to be important. And to go back to your question, we were queued up to possibly look at doing a friendly this summer. We did submit a proposal during this period of time for the CONCACAF Gold Cup for 2021. We're still waiting to know the results of that process, and we will continue to review and analyze soccer matches for the future at M&T Bank Stadium and across the state.
I understand that all the states involved in this thing, and it's a 3-country event, the World Cup 2026. They all want to, I guess, optimally host a game. Is that what would make this a slam dunk success for the state of Maryland if you host a game, or are there methodologies or things that could occur in Maryland that would still make it a success even if we didn't have a game here?
Yeah, there are a couple things that could, make this a huge success, without a match. Obviously the match is it's the Super Bowl of, winning the right to be a part of it. However, the FIFA Congress that happens, anywhere from, a year out to 6 months out from the games, that's a huge get from the business community perspective. If we were to land that in Baltimore, that's all 48 countries having to come send a delegation to Baltimore for 10 days of workshops, where everything talking about egress, regress, from the 3 nations, talking about, how they're going to pot out the venues to, referees, security, you name all the things that go into hosting this thing for 10 days. That means they're eating in our restaurants. That means they're out exploring our destination. And then the nice part about that means we're probably going to be at base camp for one of the teams when they, qualify for the World Cup. And being a base camp means that team has to come back to our site after every match, and they train here, and they can build the camaraderie and then a fan fest that goes along with it. So, if we get the right assignment on a team and we get the FIFA Congress, there's a big win there. That's something that you don't get every day. But the ultimate goal is to host some matches. I mean, without doubt, you don't put yourself forward, to not want to host matches. So, we're looking forward to any of those possibilities, but at the end of the day, we got to fight, to make sure that Baltimore, remains relevant, and the state of Maryland is there to, support that effort, and the efforts being led through, the Maryland Sports Commission. So we're excited, we're really excited to start, rolling up our sleeves and really getting dirty with this project. And we need COVID to go away, but we also know that the reality is it's here, and we're going to have to deal with it and come up with unique strategies to how we, go through that channel.
Hey, Terry, one of the unfortunate casualties really of COVID was a big cycling event that was scheduled for Baltimore coming up in September, if I'm not mistaken. And this, I think, would have been the first of its kind really for the city, the Maryland Cycling Classic. Tell us a little bit about that, what kind of an impact it'll have that it won't be here, and will it be able to come back for 2021?
Well, we had some great conversations with the UCI and with USA Cycling. Making the decision to postpone until 2021 wasn't an easy one. However, it's a mass gathering event. It's a pro series 1-day event with the likes of riders that will ride in the Tour de France. And with Tour de France moving its date, it also became a unique challenge because a lot of those riders would be occupied with the Tour de France because of their new state schedule. It just got a little bit challenging from that perspective. However, UCI is committed to supporting us going into 2021. Medalist Sports, along with KOM, are still with us. John Kelly is still the chair of our committee. We just signed a huge sponsor in United Healthcare. So everything's moving in a positive direction that 2021 is going to be a huge success. The challenge and why we had to postpone, it draws potentially around 100,000 people to the streets of Baltimore.
Wow.
in the county. So as much as you can put everything in place for how the riders are going to interact and engage and how the police are going to help us with the roads and those type of things, the fact that there was going to be these little day parties along the course in various locations, that's not easy to control. And you're talking in numbers, in excess of 100,000. It just became to the point where, all the protocols and the procedures that are in place that you have to take into account now with COVID, in the back of your mind, and all the health things that you have to put in place, like sanitation, wash your hands, wearing face masks, the enforcement on that stuff would have been overwhelming. And I don't know how we could have kept people away from it. It's not like M&T Bank where you can control the venue. The venue are the roads and the streets of Baltimore County and Baltimore City. And we can't control where people congregate. So we just wanted to make sure that we did it right, we did it safe, and you only have one time to make a first impression. And we want our first impression to be something spectacular. And right now, the logistics and the things that we're facing with the pandemic weren't getting us there.
Along the same lines, Terry, the Baltimore Running Festival, the marathon in October, has there been an announcement about that? And what are the chances that that is going to be able to be held?
I think they have not made an announcement. I think they are waiting to see a little bit longer how things begin, gradually stage opened. Where we'll become probably, mid-August maybe, I think is when they're going to probably have to, make that, tough decision. The good part about the running festival, it's a domestic event primarily. There are some international runners that do participate, but for the most part, it's a domestic event. So you're talking about people getting here in cars or driving in, where you're talking about the Cycling Classic and a couple of the other events we're probably going to get to. They're international events and talking about people being able to travel in, being able to set up camp here for a while. Those things become a unique challenge because we don't know what the travel regulations are going to be. And you got to take that into the equation as you start moving this thing forward.
Terry, along those same lines, you and I have talked extensively about your involvement with Fair Hill and the steeplechase community, as they had always had like a 3-star event, and they petitioned to get a rarity, a 4-star event, were successful in gaining that 4-star event, and then decided to decline that. This is all over about a 2 or 3 year period. They declined accepting the 4-star event to get a shot at a 5-star event, which is incredibly rare. And you've compared it to almost like a yearly, like a Preakness in terms of economics. And you had that. The state has put a lot of money in, as has Fair Hill, to fix up the courts to meet the standards necessary to do a 5-star. That has now been postponed for a year. Talk about, and look, nobody's taking a violin out and feeling sorry for anybody. No. Everybody's paid, but that's got to be disappointing to work so hard for an event that means so much and to have it postponed.
Well, I think the challenge is you have the state has invested, significant, capital to make a world-class turf track up there, along with a world-class cross-country course and the footing necessary to create 3 rings to have a world-class venue for a competition that we worked very hard to go after and get. And we did win the rights, and we created an organizing committee in and around that and hired Jeff Newman, and a staff to start putting that event in its totality, because, you're talking about an event that as it grows over the next several years is going to elevate into an event, that is going to bring 80,000+ people onto the Fair Hill grounds, for competition. You have dressage and in cross country, which is the really big day, and then show jumping, which is day 3 of the competition. I mean, the impact of that, creating a true Maryland flair, everything was lining up for a huge delivery. However, once again, going back to our previous conversation, you're talking about international competitors. You're talking about, now you're talking about bringing a horse. It's one thing to bring a bike over, but now you're bringing a horse. And what are going to be the rules and regulations, not only for travel, but also as it pertains to getting the horse over here and then quarantining the horse, because it has to go through a quarantine period, as well as probably some of the people would have to go through quarantine periods. And there's just too many unknowns. So much like the Cycling Classic, the Fair Hill Organizing Committee sat and did the due diligence of trying to figure it out. And at the end of the day, it just made more sense to go back to that same adage we used before. You only have one time to make a first impression. And the last thing you want to do is try to put on a world-class event where you can have no fans, and the athletes are going to have to be regulated to such a level that you don't know, whether they're going to be able to, make it through the 3 days just because of the unique challenges of what they have to go through. So it just made sense. We're very fortunate, though. We got a really great team, and Kim, and Jeff, and Caitlin, and the like, and Mike Hankin and Mike Gill have signed on to stay with us as the co-chairs of that event. So we're excited. It's just a little disappointed right now, but we're bouncing back. We're big people, and we realize that we're making the right decisions, and we're going to do something pretty awesome for Maryland. So, that's the highlight there is we're going to do something really spectacular for Maryland. We just need more time because of what's going on in society right now.
Yeah, we were excited to work with you on that because it's really, really a big event. Terry, I'm going to interrupt there for a second. Can you go back and turn that light on? For some reason, during the course of the 25 minutes, it's gotten darker and darker. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I think storms are moving in.
Yeah.
Yes, we have storms moving in, which is, blocking the light that usually comes in through the front window.
All right. Now, as we move forward on this, and we'll both ask a couple more questions. Last summer, the Orioles exercised their right to put on a big-time concert. They had Billy Joel there. It was a smashing success.
Yes.
Did that change anything in the dynamic of how the two stadiums will be used in the future, Terry?
It created a really nice dynamic, in all fairness, because we know that we only have limited time availability during the baseball season, because they play the number of games they play, the transition between, the field and everything like that. The fact that there's a conversation now, and, we're all receptive to having, and the Stadium Authority, along with the Orioles, along with the Ravens, it's actually created a conversation on our complex that was probably missing to a degree, probably just a few years ago. And it's opened up that discussion pool for opportunities, looking at available dates, both during the baseball season and during the football season, then during the off season. So I think it's actually enhanced the relationship entirely across the complex. And I think that's a net positive. Now, obviously, there's only so many concerts and so many things out there. And those are the things that we have to be mindful from the Maryland Stadium Authority is about how we're engaging so that we're getting, good quality pieces of business that are good for the complex and good for the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore. But at the same time, that we're not jeopardizing or risking other opportunities, for the sake of one versus the other. So I think it's created a really healthy conversation across the board.
Hey, Terry, can you give us an idea, it's bittersweet, actually. The Navy Notre Dame game was scheduled for Dublin, Ireland, which would have been a fantastic event worldwide, right? Exactly. It is coming to Maryland. They are going to hold it at Navy Marine Corps. We don't know if there are going to be fans there. I hope at least there are midshipmen there. Talk a little bit about that, number one. But number two, maybe looking ahead to the future, the chances of a big-time college football game, whether it be Maryland, Navy, Navy Notre Dame, Army Navy, coming to Baltimore.
Well, we're constantly having that discussion. Obviously, the Army-Navy game is something that's always in our bailiwick. The next round, we're going to go, we're going to jump back in it again. That's a great quality of life event for the state of Maryland, Navy being right down the road, the camaraderie that's built in the community during that period of time. I'm extremely excited. I was really extremely excited that I potentially was going to Ireland to watch the Navy Notre Dame game, because you put, both my teams that wear gold helmets against one another. I want to be there, and I'm going to do everything I can in my power to try to be in Annapolis if I'm allowed. But I think it's a really big get. Just think of it, that's a game that usually rotates around the country, when it's Navy's home year, to various, whether it's San Diego, whether it's Baltimore, whether it's FedEx Field, whether it's over in Ireland. It's a really, awesome event. And the fact that this year it's going to be played in Annapolis is fantastic. Whether I have fans, your guess is as good as mine. But I'm sure there's going to be something that creates some type of atmosphere. It would be really unique to play Navy in a game and not see, cadets in uniform and that type of thing. It'd just be a real oddity. However, the safety of the athletes and the safety of, the fans has got to be, a top priority.
Gotcha. And along those same lines, as far as college football is concerned, it's been a while since Maryland has played a game at M&T Bank Stadium. Mike Loxley, obviously in his second year now, a lot of connections, a lot of ties to Baltimore. Have there been discussions with Maryland about a potential opponent here?
I know that the Ravens have a really close relationship with the University of Maryland athletic department, and have, obviously keeping in touch there, between myself and our team and then the Ravens, and we're constantly, mining that environment. I know there's been a lot of discussions over the years. I'm gonna be candid. I'm not any that I'm aware of recently, but that doesn't mean they're not happening. That just means that, Mike and team down in, College Park might be revving up to get another class in, so that who that opponent might be that, wants to play in a big time, NFL stadium, we're ready and we're always willing to listen, no matter what the opportunity is. We've been talking to some other, clubs that I can't talk about playing a neutral site football game at M&T in the future.
Terry Hasseltine is our guest. Terry, the Orioles, it's hard to believe that Camden Yards opened in 1992. And that means in 2022, it's going to be 30 years old. And that means that the contract that was originally signed and then extended very early on to be 30 years is going to expire. I know you were fairly down the road with the Orioles. Has the pandemic slowed those discussions and possibly changed what the Orioles want out of a deal or anything like that?
From the best of my knowledge, I believe the conversation is still fluid. It's still positive. I mean, I think John Angelo said it best when he was at the Visit Baltimore annual meeting, and he said, as long as Fort McHenry is protecting the harbor, the Orioles will be in Baltimore. So I think that's a sign that there's optimism and there's a positive approach of going into the negotiation process. And it's really not a good negotiation; it's a partnership. We're trying to evaluate a partnership on how we both, can, mutually benefit out of the opportunity in a world-class ballpark. I mean, Camden Yards is still the standard bearer across the league in so many levels. We take a lot of pride at MSA of our role in, maintaining and upkeeping that facility, creating those partnerships with teams. Same thing with M&T Bank Stadium. So, at the end of the day, it's very optimistic, very positive, and I think John set the tone when he made that statement at the Visit Baltimore annual meeting.
Gary, you want to ask a final question?
Final one for me, Terry. I'm gonna throw you an oldie but a goodie. You just mentioned the two world-class stadiums that you have downtown, M&T and Oriole Park.
Yeah.
A couple of blocks north of that, I guess, is an old arena that has a lot of great memories in it. Great concerts, landmark concerts, multiple championships, great games and teams have played there. But no one would mistake that for a world-class arena. And again, the oldie but the goodie, my question, is there any talk at all, or has the pandemic quashed it, or was it quashed before that, about doing something great down there?
That conversation is still happening. Now, has it quieted during the pandemic? Yeah, because everybody's focused in on, obviously, the facilities like the convention center, which was converted into the hospital for the time being. Also now is turning into a test site for residents of Baltimore. So when it comes to the arena, there's a lot of discussion around it. The CIAA is coming to Baltimore and playing in that arena starting in 21. Those are discussions that we're having with the conference right now. But those conversations haven't gone away. There's some people. I guess the best way to put it, there's a lot of school of thought on what's the best route for a new or revamped or renovated arena in Baltimore. And right now, the question is what's the appetite going to be for that type of project in the real near future, when we know that we're going to have to recover economically. We just basically went through 12 weeks where there's no revenues coming in, to the city and to the states, and we got to rebound off of that. And we got to find good opportunities that can help us rebound. And a significant project of that nature is going to take someone probably from the private sector stepping up to support that effort. And right now, don't know who that person or persons might be.
Terry, before I let you go, I would be remiss, Gary and I haven't asked you any questions about this new deal that's in place to have a sort of a refurbished Pimlico racetrack to keep the Preakness in Baltimore.
Mhm.
Now, Gary and I have lived in the city at different times in our lives. We know it's important to the city. You work for the state. The Preakness was not in danger of leaving the state at
Nope.
any time in the last few years. How big a deal is it to keep the Preakness in Baltimore? How important is it to Baltimore City?
I think when you look at an event as a third longest running sporting event in the United States, behind the Derby and the Westminster Dog Show, it's pretty significant. It means that it's been somewhere for a very, very long time. There's history, there's culture, there's tradition, and also at a time in which you're dealing with a city that needs a victory. We're coming off of a couple years ago. We had the incident. People were starting to look at Baltimore under a different light and
Yep.
a different prism. So having a chance to have a victory of this nature, while at the same time securing an upgrade and an enhancement for the racing industry across the state, I think it's a huge victory for the city of Baltimore. I think we're excited from the fact that the governor asked us, we're here to serve, and when he and the legislature asked us to play a role through the Maryland State Authority, we said we're here to serve and we're ready to help and support where we can and what we need to do. So that project's getting underway, and we're excited to be a part of it.
I think it's really something. I'm glad there were some people that really pushed on beyond what seemed appropriate and functionally possible to make it stay in Baltimore. And I applaud Alan Rifkin and Joe DeFrancis and those folks that did the work on that. Terry Hasseltine, always a pleasure to talk to you. You've done an amazing job in your now close to 13 years here in the state of Maryland, correct? 13?
You're 1 year too beyond. It'll be my 12th year starting in August.
Unbelievable.
So pretty darn close.
Unbelievable.
Good stuff.
We'll talk to you down the road, all right? Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. I greatly appreciate. Great spending the evening with you.
All right, Gary, great talking to you too, as
Thank you, Stanley.
usual.
Thank you, Terry.
And that's it for us at Press Box. We hope you enjoyed this.
Thank you.